welcome back to the Mr. Productivity Podcast. On the show, Alex, he'll tell you what his last name is. He is the founder of Podmatch.com. It's a software that automatically matches podcast guests and hosts for interviews. He is also the host of the top-rated show, Podcasting Made Simple, and a lead educator in the podcasting industry. Alex's sole focus is to serve independent podcast guests and hosts so they can grow their influence and revenue so they can better serve their listeners. Alex, welcome to the show. And how do you say your last name?
Mark, it's so great to be here. Sanfilippo. So Alex Sanfilippo. Man, I hope that something we just did makes the blooper reel. Like, I know you're like, I've never had to do that before on an introduction, but like you had something you had to tweak. So I hope it makes a blooper reel as a podcaster. I love that stuff. But anyway, Alex Sanfilippo is how it's pronounced. But Mark, seriously, an honor to be here. I have been listening to a lot of your podcasts, learning from it. So it's like a true gift to get to be in this seat with you today. Thank you.
Listener, viewer, if you're watching on Spotify or YouTube, listen to the end of the show. You never know what's going to be there. I'm not going to put it at the beginning. I'm going to reward you. Now, don't cheat and fast forward, okay? Listen to the whole episode and hear the bloopers. I wish I could lock that out. So if they'd say, I want to listen to bloopers, and I wish I could lock it out. But anyway,
podcasting. That's a cool idea. Just saying.
There you go. Well, I have been a paying customer of Podmatch for a year in November. So this episode's coming out in December. So last month, even though we're recording this October 30th, it's last month. So just go with me, audience. And I love Podmatch. I've tried numerous other services to get booked and have people book on my show. But this, believe it or not, is not really a show about podcasting. So if you're like, wait a minute, this is the Mr. Productivity Podcast. I think I talk about podcasting a little bit, but I have to start out with this because when I was looking for how to send you the link, I'm using the new service to record this podcast. I'm like, okay, he only has one general email, which is the same email that people can email Podmatch at, and he doesn't have a cell phone. And I'm like, okay, when he told me this on the Podmatch DMs, I'm like, we definitely have to start here. So let's start off with, you don't really do email, but you could tell the story about, you do have an iPhone, but you really don't have an iPhone.
Yeah, so I use the iPhone SE. It's just one of the models of it. It's the smallest model, and that's why I want it, because my wife, Alicia, who's also my co-founder in Podmatch, specifically said, dude, you can't not have a cell phone. Like, if you're out with friends or doing something, like, I want to be able to get a hold of you. I'm like, all right, then I'm getting the smallest phone that Apple has. And it's funny, I made that commitment, Mark, when I think it was the iPhone 14 came out, and I had the iPhone 14. I went to the Apple store and said, can I trade this for an SE? And they got all the way to the manager of the Apple store came out. And he's like, are you sure you want to do this? I was like, yeah. I was like, why? He goes, no one has ever done this before. He goes, this is strange. I was like, all right. So I got the smallest phone. And then immediately when we set it up, I put on a screen time password that I don't have. Alicia has it. So I had her delete every app. And believe it or not, you can actually even delete the internet, Safari, from an iPhone. And so we deleted everything except it actually has three things I told you earlier too, and I forgot one. I have the calendar as well. Calendars, listen, productivity, you got to have a calendar, right? So I always need my calendar, and then I have a phone, and then I have texting. So it's technically an iPhone, but even if someone texts me a link, I can't click it. I can just tell someone tried to send me a link. And Alicia's the one with the password. I have no way around that at all. And for me, the reason I did that, because it sounds crazy to most people, I'll be real. Like, I get it. The reason I did this is because I was spending so much time on my phone, like just addicted to it, and not with things that are productive. And I know some people are really productive on their phones. I was not. I was like scrolling through, laughing at videos on the different social media platforms. I'm like, I saw the screen time thing by mistake one day. I'm like, 4 hours in one day. I'm like, I've got a lot of time I could probably reclaim if I did this. So it took a big level of self-discipline, but it's been extremely rewarding. And most of the time, like even now, my phone is 2 rooms over from me sitting in a closet, and I will grab it at the end of the day to see if any friends want to hang out, type of thing.
Interesting. Now, you said something very key, discipline. So I'm Mr. Productivity. I love my iPhone 13 Pro Max, but I'm not addicted to my phone or social media. So every once in a while, someone will get a DM from me on Instagram about a reel I saw. And they're like, I thought you didn't use Instagram. You just posted there. Yeah, but when my video's uploading, I see the first post there. If the post, connects with me, I share it. But as soon as my post uploads, I get off this platform. And people go, how do you do that? It's called discipline or called adulting. So my phone does not beckon me. When we're done recording this episode, I am done for the day. My favorite European football team, the only sport I watch is European football. We call it soccer in the United States, is on television. So I will actually watch the match. And the only time I'll use my phone is my cousin up in New York. I'm in Houston. Him and I will snap back and forth. I love Snapchat. We'll snap back and forth as we're watching the game. But that's it. And I think it comes down to discipline. It comes down to being an adult. It's not Facebook's fault. It's not TikTok's fault. Yes, they do create these apps to be highly addictive, but guess what? My phone is face down, it's muted, and it's on Do Not Disturb. So if someone calls me right now, I'm not going to know it. So stop making excuses. Control your tech instead of allowing your tech control you.
Man, that's so well said. Like, control your tech. And that's exactly what I did. I actually realized I don't know if I didn't have the self-discipline, or what it really came down to was actually the desire. Like, I was okay with spending multiple hours per day scrolling through, just laughing at random stuff. But at the end of the day, I realized my day wasn't fulfilling, right? Like, so every day. And so I took extreme action. Yes. Like, do I think that makes me more productive than other people? No. I just knew that, like, my own level of self-discipline was probably not going to be overcome that. That's something I admire about you, Mark. Like, you really are intentional with the way you live, and even the way you use social media. Like, snapping back and forth with someone when you're watching European football, like, that's the perfect use case for what social media is actually for, not to sit and scroll for hours, right? So I really admire that. And I love that you brought that up, because I think that for anyone listening who's trying to get more productive, the phones can be one of the most dangerous things that we have in today's world. It's like, in some ways, the complete counter of productivity.
I heard about a month ago, I saw a video with Dr. Phil, and he was saying one of the most recent fundamental changes in our world is when the iPhone came out, and these huge American planes went across the country dropping iPhones for everybody. And that's when it changed, because then people stopped living eyeball to eyeball and they started living through their phones. And he's right. Think about before iPhone. Yes, there were smartphones, but people weren't addicted to them. The iPhone came along and everyone is like, they're on their phone. And if you're watching this in a video, they're look at their phone and they're constantly on their phone. I'm like, okay, you checked your text messages. Maybe you checked in on Instagram. How can you spend 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 hours on your phone on a social media platform? And I have people I love in my life, and I'm like, are they paying you to do that? Well, no. Why are you giving them so much of your time and attention? I get that it's addicting, but listen, there's an old saying the kids used to say, I'm probably really outdated now. You better check yourself before you wreck yourself. Control your tech instead of your tech controlling you. Now, the other thing about you is you don't do email. Now, I hate email, but I have email because I got to log into Instagram. I got to log into LinkedIn. I got to log into Podmatch. But you use the same email address as people who are reaching out to Podmatch for support. Why do you do that? I mean, that's crazy in my opinion.
So crazy in your opinion? Yes. There's a tool that I'm using that makes it not as crazy, because I agree, just having one inbox is a lot. But we made that decision when we launched the company that, hey, there's 3 co-founders. We'll be the 3 that have the access to the quote unquote inbox. So we just made it team@podmatch.com. And anybody listening to this, if you email that to test this, you'll get me, Alicia, or Jesse, depending on what type of question you ask. But we use a website called Front App. It has the word app. It's web-based. So it's called Front. I think it might even be frontapp.com or maybe just front.com. But it's an email service that has your main inbox. So everything will go there, but then it allows it to be filtered to different people's inboxes. So okay. I do have an email address. It's team@podmatch.com. And it's when Alicia is our first line of defense, if you will, to check what comes in the inbox. And she'll organize it to herself, to me, to Jesse. And if we have any other team members that need to do something, she's able to assign it to them as well. They do have their own email addresses, though, just for privacy's sake, because all the invoices stuff come this one as well. We're the only 3 who have these actual boxes, and then she can kind of forward it around. But yeah, so front.com is what actually makes it work. I'm not affiliated with them or anything. It's actually a fairly expensive service, but it makes one inbox operate as multiple and allows us to add our own internal discussion to things. You can see all kinds of data. And I'm not huge just on data for the sake of data, but I can see, have I forgotten to respond to anything? And that's kind of what got me away from use of Gmail, which is what I previously used. And I know I probably still have, I don't know, an Alex Sanfilippo at gmail.com account somewhere, right? I know I do actually. It has to be there because that's my email address is. I have a Google email or Google Calendar. And so I know it's somewhere in there. But I just found it for me, I really struggled to keep up. And I found the same sort of addictive behavior that I had on the phone. I was checking my email all the time, and it's a bunch of dumb newsletters I couldn't figure out how to unsubscribe from, right? Like I unsubscribe, the next day it's back. Are you sure? Here's something really cool. I'm like, that is cool, right? So for me, it kind of came back to the same thing. I was like, man, I really just know that if I'm in an inbox, I want it to be very, very intentional time, not me scrolling through looking for the next fun thing to click. And this might be making me sound like I have no self-discipline at all. I just like to put parameters and guardrails around my life to make sure that I don't slip into kind of what I see a lot of people slipping into in the world we live in, as we already addressed.
Oh, I applaud you for that, because a lot of people just throw their hands up and go, yeah, it is what it is. No, it isn't what it is. You can change it. Now, I recently switched over to a private email service called Proton Mail. They're based out of Switzerland. I have Proton Drive, Proton Paths, Proton VPN. And the thing I like about their Proton Unlimited Paths program, my wife and I have Proton Dual, which means we both get the exact same features, but they have unlimited aliases. So when I sign up for someone's email newsletter, I get a very unique email address, which you can't even tell it's mine. What it does, it forwards it to my main Proton email address. And so if I try to unsubscribe and you don't, I just have to delete the email address and it's gone and it'll just bounce back to you. So I think that's important. Unfortunately, I still have a Gmail address because I do post on YouTube. I hate that fact that I got to have a YouTube email address, but if you're going to be on YouTube, you got to have a YouTube email, a Google email address. But I want to go back before we move on. I want to go back to the social media thing. I recently deleted Facebook and TikTok, almost deleted Instagram. But when you go and delete these, they send you those emails like, hey, we're going to give you 30 days to consider about whether you want to delete your account or not. And I made it to 21 days. I'm like, you know what? I think I want to build up Instagram like I'm building up my LinkedIn, but Facebook and TikTok, bye-bye. Because I realized I wasn't getting any podcast listeners. No one signed up for my email newsletter, no clients. I'm like, so why am I spending my time on these platforms? I'm not Gary Vaynerchuk. I don't have 15 people on my social media team. And so I identified the platforms I wanted to be on, and people are horrified. Like, you deleted your Facebook. What? Why? I'm like, let's look at your screen time. And I look at your screen time. I'm like, okay, this is why. Now, I was not addicted. Here's the funny thing. I was not addicted to TikTok. I was not addicted to Facebook. I did it because it wasn't serving me. And I believe social media or podcasting or you writing a book or anything you do should serve you. Like, I'm not a zero notifications guy. I'm an intentional notifications guy. So I allow certain notifications to come through. If they become to be a distraction, I turn them off, because you have a control over your device because you're the human and this is a machine.
You know, you bring up such a good point here that, again, anyone checking this out, like this is gold that I think a lot of people just really don't apply in their lives. But you have control over the machines in your life. I was recently at lunch with a friend, and he had his phone sitting face up, which is fine. I left mine in the car. I wasn't going to need Alicia at the restaurant, right? But his was face up, and he must have had notifications on for everything. The phone was consistently just lit up. And I don't know about you, like I'm not like eavesdropping or trying to be nosy, but like when a screen lights up, I look. Like it's just like if someone appears in the corner of your vision, you kind of like look a little bit, right? So I just was glancing, and I didn't feel I had the place to say this, but I want to be like, why don't you turn off some of these? Like, you can't care about all that stuff. Like, it's literally just constantly telling you to pick it up. And I think that the problem is many of us, we don't take the time to even figure out how to turn off our notifications. Not that it's hard, but like if you spend an hour intentionally on your phone, making it so that it serves you instead of you serving it, I think that you'd have a much better life.
I call the notification cleanse, and I think everyone listening to this episode should do that. And all that is, you go through every notification on every device, and you look and say, okay, is this distraction or serving me? And if you turn it off, guess what? This is going to blow your mind, Alex. You can turn it back on. It's amazing how you have total control of the notifications. But I'm like, when people get all these dings from social media, I understand what happened. They downloaded the app and it says, do you want to allow notifications? They just click allow. And the developer is going to turn them all on. So here's an idea. Say, don't allow. Then after the app is installed, go into the app settings and turn on the ones you want. It really is that simple.
Yeah. And for me, I do that because I'm an inbox zero guy. I'm also a notification zero guy. So like I have pretty much everything off. And that's actually I probably should mention that earlier. That's the main reason I don't have my own inbox is because if everything comes to it, no matter what, when I'm going to sleep, I like everything gone. And maybe that's just like my achiever mindset. But I find that if Alicia is managing it, she's like, these are the only 10 emails that you need. Like I could do this stuff for you real quick or someone else can handle this real fast. But these are actual humans wanting to talk to you. I can respond to those 10 people in a day without me having to stay up late and stuff like that to feel like I could check off all the boxes. And listen, Mr. Productivity, I know this might be a problem to like always have to have everything checked off. I'm slightly addicted to it. I really love productivity, even sometimes for the sake of productivity, which might not be the best thing. But again, I want to control those notifications because I want them all gone. So I don't want many of them so that it, again, doesn't rule my life. Just productivity for the sake of productivity it can lead to an unproductive life.
Oh, 100%. And so I use multiple text messaging apps. Of course, I got the normal iMessage. I also use Signal. I use WhatsApp and I use Telegram, but I'm very careful. So the people who DM me throughout the day, they have jobs and they're not pinging me every moment of the day. So if I get something like we're recording this before election, all these, hey, vote for me, I just report those as junk. Because I want to be able to leave my messaging apps on. I don't use Facebook Messenger. I want to be able to leave those on, but not be distracted. And I think it's going to be different for every person. I don't think, in my opinion, everyone, like Tim Ferriss is a big do not disturb guy. And I always wondered, okay, so if your mother has a heart attack and died, who's going to let you know? So I do have certain notifications on. My phone right now is set for, I created a focus mode on my iPhone called going live. So whenever I go live or record a podcast, it blocks everything. My wife, everything. I think that's really important because if you don't take that into consideration, what's going to happen is you're going to be doing, oh, wait, who's this? And we're going to want to answer that phone. I'm in an interview and I want to check that. Even though it's face down, if I hear it go ding, that's why I don't have vibration mode on my phone, because that vibration is also distraction. So people, disable your vibration mode. That will save you so much grief, but then do a notification cleanse.
It's smart. For me, the last thing I'll kind of want to share on this point, actually, I love your advice on this. I, for a while, turned off all notifications, but I found I was picking up my phone more, especially like on the weekends when I'm not working, because I wanted to see, did I miss anything? Which, again, it can only be a notification from my calendar or a phone call or a text message. But I kept on picking it up and there was nothing there because I wouldn't know unless I picked it up. So I actually reverted and said, okay, go ahead and send me those notifications. And the same thing, I just want to pop up on the screen. I don't want any noise unless it's a phone call. For my wife, she's, you can build like a favorite list or whatever. Aside from that, all I want to see is the text messages pop up but not hear it. And that made me pick up my phone less because I knew I wasn't missing anything if I looked at the screen. And similar to that with my inbox, I started setting time in my calendar to open my inbox because if it's open all the time, I found myself just always working it down to inbox zero because, again, I have a slight problem there. Any thoughts or advice on that for me, and hopefully something is valuable for the listeners? I'm just curious because you really have figured this stuff out.
Well, everyone has to think about where are they weak. So for me with email, first of all, stop giving your email address to everybody. Stop signing up for email newsletters you're probably not going to read. You don't need that coupon. Just go pay full price. But what I try to do is if I get a notification, I don't get notifications for email. I have those turned off. But let's say I go in my inbox and I say, well, Alex sent me this newsletter. Oh, this is something I really want to read. Well, I won't leave it there because I don't like it sitting in my inbox for long periods of time. What I'll do is I'll scan the email. I'm like, okay, this is going to take me about 15 minutes to read. I will schedule time on my calendar. Then I will snooze that email until that time. So now it's not in my inbox. I have scheduled time on my calendar to read it. But a lot of people, what they do is they go, select all, archive, select all, archive. That's not solving the problem. All that's doing is imagine you're out at the picnic and you have all these ants around. So you shake the what's that, tablecloth or whatever, that blanket, and you put it back down again. Well, the ants are going to come back because you probably have food residue or something on there. So what I'm telling people, what they have to do is you have to be proactive. Figure out a system that works for you. Now, I don't recommend living in email. Don't have your email notifications on. The only exception is if you're expecting a really important email. And even then, you could just check your email. But the problem is, unless you're disciplined like me or Alex, and you open it, you're looking for that one message, and you're like, oh, I got these other 12. And you all of a sudden, you're down that rabbit hole. So where is your weakness? And figure out how you can solve this problem. And if you want some help, go to my website, MrProductivity.com, MISTER, MrProductivity.com, and sign up for a free 20-minute coaching call with me. Yeah, I did say it. It's free. So don't make excuses. There are ways you can do this, but if you're not willing to be disciplined, if you're not willing to take responsibility, well, neither I or any other coach can be able to help you, because you got to start with that mindset like, okay, I have a problem I want to solve. I am willing to commit to solving my problem.
So good. I took a ton of notes here. I know this is a podcast, but I'm taking notes for myself, and also extremely generous offer to meet with somebody. That can go from like, hey, I'm struggling, to like having a real plan, figuring out what works for them. This is great. Thank you. So cool.
No worries. So podmatch.com, as I mentioned earlier, I tried a bunch of other services. Some were paid, some were free. And I kind of got frustrated with them because I wouldn't get quality guests. I'd get people who are trying to build their presence and they're using podcasting. They don't know what a microphone is. And it got really frustrating. I'm looking for professionals to come on the show who can help my audience. So take us back to the very beginning when there was no Podmatch, and you're like, you know what? I can see there's a problem in this industry and I want to help solve it. So tell us how you started forming podmatch.com.
Yeah, sure. And I'll give a quick overview of what Podmatch is for anyone listening. Podmatch is a software that connects podcast guests and hosts for interviews. I like to say it works similar to a dating app, but instead of connecting you for dates, connects you for podcast interviews. Like that's how we got connected here. I'm the guest. The system matched us. We messaged in the platform, did everything there, and here we are. And the whole idea is to remove the friction that's involved for a guest and a host. And a quick little note here. I wrote this down because I want to make sure I brought it up. But Mark, you inspired us to add a pre-interview option to our workflow inside of Podmatch. It's officially live as of last week. So thank you so much for that idea. Really, really great. Got a lot of immediate feedback from people being like, this is great. Mark was the only person who said something. So thank you for saying something that can be better for all of us. And again, the whole idea is just, can we just streamline everything in between so that we can actually get behind the mic faster, spend more time here, because this is what really adds value and serves listeners. So that's kind of the idea behind Podmatch, but it came from not like a moment of pure genius or anything like that. I was actually, in the beginning of 2020, I was speaking at a big podcasting conference in Orlando, Florida. There's about 2,000 people there. And I knew that I wanted to work in podcasting. And so kind of what I had learned about entrepreneurship is kind of 4 steps. One, you find an area of passion, which for me had become podcasting. I was a host myself. Step two, you get into the community. So I was speaking at the events. I was going to the events. I was in the community. And then 3 is to find a problem they're struggling with. And then immediately followed by 4, which is to offer the simplest, fastest solution to that problem. So I was currently in this mode of like, this is the community. I'm in front of them. I'm in front of 2,000 people. Little did I know that was one of the last times to be in front of that many people for the foreseeable future. But when I got off a stage, anyone who would talk to me, I had pen and paper in hand. I said, what is it that you're struggling with most in podcasting? And I heard a lot of things, but I did hear 100 people. I stopped it when 100 people said the same thing. Alex, I'm having trouble finding the right guest for my show. And it wasn't just guest, it was the right guest. So I knew that, like, okay, I can't just tell him, well, my cousin would like to be on your show, right? Like, it had to actually be the right person. And so went home with that, whiteboarded out, end up really come up with this idea once again of like, could we build something like that has something similar that's been done for the dating world, for podcasting? Listen, I've been married too long to even have used a dating app, so I had to ask some friends for some wise counsel. But what I ended up doing was calling up a old friend of mine and just pitched the idea to him. He was a developer, and he loved it, and he had just finished a long-term contract, and he's like, man, I would love to work on this. We had legal documentation drafted up. Me, him, and my wife, Alicia, are the three partners in it. And we hit the ground running. And that was the idea finished. We started work on March 10th, 2020. And by June 15th, 2020, that's when we launched into an early beta of what became Podmatch.
Wow. That's fascinating. And I can tell you, in the year I've been with you, I have seen continuous improvement. And to me, that's a sign of an incredible app. I mean, apps that come out and you look at the App Store and it hasn't updated in 2 years. It's like, really? You haven't come up with anything in 2 years? But you guys have continuously updated. And as I didn't even know about the pre-interview option. And so you listened to what we were saying and you built that in. So I give you guys great credit for that, because I think that's a sign of a great company who realizes the company's not for them, it's for the users. And you actually listened to what we wanted.
For me, listen, the member, the community, that is everything. And so we're really big on evaluating any feedback. As a matter of fact, we always say internally, we don't build the roadmap for the business. Now, there's some infrastructure stuff that no one's ever going to ask for, right? Like there's things in the background, like how we need to tweak the code that, yes, Jesse chooses to prioritize that stuff when we need to prioritize it. But anything that's front facing, we try to ask people. We try to watch how people are using it. I do a lot of calls where I'm literally just watching how somebody's using the software and like, okay, everyone gets stuck right here. Like we need to fix that. That's a friction point that we need to remove. And for me, it's all about just, I always say, like serving our members, our community. And for me, that's what it is all about. And so like as an entrepreneur, I guess it's called agility. Like I'm very agile, and we are as a company, to make sure that we're really just always moving and shaking to improve for the people that are trusting us with their time and their wallets in our scenario as well.
Is it on your roadmap, and feel free to say no comment, is it on your roadmap to make this an all-in-one service? In other words, where we'll be able to record video podcasts directly in Podmatch?
It's not. I'm terrified of that. That's the reason.
Okay.
Because like right now we're in Rooms, which is in a beta. But if this recording doesn't work, like for some reason, let's say we get to the end of it and it didn't record, man, I just don't know if I want that pressure, right? Like that I'll be real, that scares me. Like I would love to at some point make it all in one thing, but like I personally don't know how to overcome that specific fear. And I'm being fully transparent here. That terrifies me. I wouldn't sleep for days if somebody told me I recorded something and didn't record. Like I would put that on myself more than I definitely should. So that's why it's been asked. It's just, we've pushed that one down quite a bit.
It's on the list, but it's really, really far down the list. Let me ask you this, your thoughts on video podcasting. So I launched my podcast July 7th, 2017, and I was always the OG. Podcast should be audio only. But then video podcasting kept getting more and more popular. So about 5 months ago, I made the switch from Libsyn over to Spotify for podcasting, which as of the date of this recording this podcast is free. And the only way you can have a video podcast on Spotify is if they host it. Now, Spotify for podcasters, I upload the MP4 and then it sends the MP3 to everywhere else. So you're not missing anything. But I don't get why people want to look at our two talking heads. Why do you think video podcasting is so hot now?
A lot of it might, I don't know. I'm very careful with this, but a lot of it might just be kind of like smoke and mirrors a little bit. It's like the new thing, and YouTube is obviously putting everything they can into promoting it. Like the day they released podcasting, or like quote unquote podcasting, they claim that they now have the biggest platform for podcast listenership. I'm like, did anyone like fact check that? Like, yeah, you launched it. Now you're the biggest, like in 1 hour. Like, I don't know. Right. And at first they were counting any consistent YouTube channel as a podcast. I'm like, okay, so you just said that every podcaster or every YouTuber is now a podcaster. I'm like, I don't know if it qualifies. And I actually met the guy who runs podcasting for YouTube. His name's Kai. And I sat with him and I just challenged him on this stuff. I was like, man, I don't agree with the way that I think you're actually misinforming people on the value of this. And I can't say that conversation impacted enough for them to make a change, but they did change something just a couple weeks later. And they started saying, okay, this is what we qualify as a podcast, has to be tied to this, right? And they kind of like reverted back on a little bit of it. But I think that people immediately grew accustomed to it and liked it. They like even the hosts themselves. Like if I'm going to listen to my podcast, I like to, let me go back and see it. We had a good time together, right? I'll look at it, but I'm like, I don't know if my listeners do that. And for me, the data shows that I'll get the number wrong. So I'll just say 90+% of my consumption is through audio, even though we do everything right from a video standpoint as well. Mm-hmm. And so like, again, like the numbers don't really add up. I always just tell people like, yeah, video is great if you can do it comfortably, but if it is going to kill your productivity and it's going to kill your production, then just stick with audio because that's where most of the listenership or consumption is still happening. So those are kind of some of my thoughts on video. And I always tell people like, if that's going to hinder you from starting, then don't start. Like, or then don't do video. Then stick with audio.
Hey, it's Mr. Productivity and a quick timeout from the episode. I have 2 big favors to ask of you. If you are watching or listening to this on Spotify, first of all, if you would give me a follow, that would help the Spotify algorithm to serve this podcast up to other people so I can help them like I'm helping you. And would you leave me a comment? There's a place here on Spotify where you can send me a comment. You can say hello. You can say, what up, dog? You can say, hey, Mr. Productivity, love the podcast today. Just remember, Mr. is all spelled out, M-I-S-T-E-R, Mr. Productivity. Hey, thanks for your attention. Let's get back to the episode. Woohoo! 100%. So I record video, and then you can watch the video on YouTube or Spotify, or you can listen anywhere. So you have a choice. If you start out with audio only, then you can't put the video in later. So I'm just like, I'll give people the options. The other thing I want to touch base with is this is really key, not just for podcasters, but if you want to build your brand, you want to be a guest on the show. There's a lot of different tips, and I know you've got some tips that you're going to share with us. But here's the first thing. When you are pitching for an appearance on someone's show, please do your homework. People pitch me, I can help people make money on real estate. It's called the Mr. Productivity Podcast. I can help people make money with NFTs or cryptocurrency. It's called the Mr. Productivity Podcast. And here's the thing, it's in the title. So when you start reaching out, make sure the podcaster is one that is going to reflect what you have to offer. So real estate people should go on real estate podcasts. Mindfulness experts should go on productivity, health and wellness podcasts. But it really annoys me because I get these pitches all the time, and I grew so popular that I had to actually hide my profile on Podmatch because I was getting so many pitches, and 90% of them weren't even like in the realm of I couldn't even make it fit. So if you're going to be a guest on someone's show, please spend 5 minutes and do some homework.
Man, I just talked to somebody who they were thinking about joining Podmatch. They're a guest. And they said, but before I joined, I wanted to ask you a question. I'm like, sure. They said, 3 months ago, I reached out to 100 podcasts. I only got on one of them. I think there's a problem with podcasting. And like, it took me forever to write an email back on this one because like you and I both know, common denominator there, like you reached out incorrectly if you only got on one show, or you have nothing to like, anyway, it took me forever to write this email. I'm like, how do I not say, well, you made a mistake, right? And it ultimately just became like, let me see what you're saying and let me see the list of podcasts. I'm like, that's the best help I could provide. Doing your homework is huge. But the problem is people see a show like the Mr. Productivity Podcast, which by the way is a huge show. You've done very well with it. It's in a niche. Everyone wants to be on a show of that caliber. And so they're just kind of spraying and praying. They're like, well, maybe he's always wanted to talk to someone about crypto. I'm just going to try it because it's a really successful show. And the more successful you get, the more of that you're going to get. Because people are like, any chance, I'll do anything to be on your show, right? And so I'm not saying it's a direct connection to success, but in some ways, it helps you know that you've done really well. To me, doing homework is everything. And even in the pitch, the way you reach out, there's been times I'm like, oh, I want to be on this show. But then I look at it and I'm like, actually, I'm not really a good fit. Like, I'm just not. Like, I'm not selling myself short. I just know like I'm not really the expert in that space. So I always look first, but then the actual pitch that you send as a guest proves that you did your homework or proves that you didn't, right? All the time I get people pitching mostly, I don't know why, it's mostly through LinkedIn these days where I get like the random pitches, but it's always a coach and their opening line is, I'm a coach and I want to grow my coaching practice. I'd love to be a guest on your podcast. to grow my coaching practice. I'm always like, man, I don't talk to, like, that's not my show, right? Like, and all the time, that's like the most common thing I get. And it's like a copy paste type of thing, but doing your homework, making sure you're the right fit. And then the way you reach out is really going to be the determining factor, whether that you even hear back from a host these days.
Two stories. One from Podmatch, a guy, before I hid my profile because I had so many guests to get through, a guy actually pitched me, hey, check out my profile, see if I'm a fit. That is not a pitch, okay? You don't ask the host to do your work, okay? That's number one. Number two, I found a guy on LinkedIn. I said, man, I would love to have you on my show. I think I looked at your profile here on LinkedIn. I think you'd be a good fit for my audience. This individual said, go out and buy my book, read it, and then have me on your show. And I'm like, okay, there's so many things wrong with this. I actually had to go talk to my wife because she's the voice of reason. Because I was like, is this guy kidding me? Here's what happens. When you're an author, if you want to, you send the copy of your book to the podcaster without expecting them to read it. You do it as a common courtesy. It's not required, but if you want to, but you don't tell the person, the host, to go buy your book, to read it, and have them on your show. That's another example of a poor pitch. I'm sure you've got loads of them.
Listen, maybe these guys are just really productive. I don't know, man. Maybe they just figured out the formula that you and I can't seem to get our heads around.
So share with me or share with us one of your worst podcast pitches other than the one you just shared with us.
Yeah, I had one person who reached out. This one has always stuck with me. Reached out, and it was specifically via Messenger, which I find to be a lot of spam, but it was someone I was connected with. So it came to the actual inbox. And said, hey, Alex. I was like, hey, which I'm always like immediately like, come on, give me a little more context than hey, Alex. I was like, hey. And they just said, I want to be on your podcast. And I was like, okay, do you have something you want to talk about? They're like, no, nothing specific, but I would love to talk about anything. I was like, did you check out my podcast? They're like, no, I don't have time. And I was like, well, will you listen to an episode so that I can then bring you on? They said, no, I don't have time again. They're like, but I'd like to be on it. I'm available tomorrow. And I'm like, and like, I got same thing. Voice of reason is my wife. So I had to like cool down. I'm not usually one of those guys, but I was like, I think they were trolling me. I think they were just trying to make me angry. You know, like they had to have been. And that was like the worst one that from like an I turned bright red, I'm sure, when I was reading it. And I just ended up deleting the message. And I was like, just no, right? And then a week later, they reached out and they said, hey, wanted to follow up. Like, can I come on your show? And I'm like, are you kidding me? Right? That one really stood out as like, what do you think I'm doing here? Right? Like, what do you think has gone into this show to say that that's the type of person that ends up getting on it?
Yeah. People do not understand how to have conversations in DMs. So I recently hired a coach about 4 or 5 months ago. And for the first time ever, I was explained how to do DMing people. Here's the thing. The first DM is never a pitch. The second DM is not a pitch. The third DM is not a pitch. You don't, this person doesn't know you. So you have to build the relationship. So one of the things I do is I send you a connection request. If you accept it, my first DM is, hey, Alex, appreciate the connection request. I'm looking forward to getting to know you, Mark. That's it. I'm not pitching you anything because Alex and I just met. But this happens on LinkedIn. It happens a lot on Instagram. It happens on X. It happens on Facebook. People just like, hey, I'm going to go right to the jugular. Hey, can you want to join my coaching program? You want to join my mastermind? You want to buy my book? I'm like, I don't even know who you are. And you're going for the jugular. So think about in real life, if someone walked up to you and said, hey, Alex, can I have $100,000? You're like, dude, who are you? And that's what most people do. And if you don't know how, that's okay. You can, I don't know, something crazy, learn how to properly DM and properly pitch people, not just for podcasting, but maybe you want to get people to invest in your company or whatever. You got to learn. It's not just going in for the ask. I mean, Gary Vaynerchuk had a book several years ago called Jab, 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 Right Hook, which actually means, you jab, 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 and then the right hook is the offer. Now he's actually saying it's like jab, 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 right hook. Because I'm a product of the 80s. I was born in 1965. Back in the 70s and 80s, you could ask people 3 or 4 times. Now, in the age of the internet in 2024, you may have to ask someone anywhere between, I've heard 7 to 50 times before they're even going to give you their attention. So if your first attempt is like, buy my product, well, good luck with that.
for me, we're going back to like podcast pitching. So we'll put me in the guest seat. When I reach out to be a guest, I'll kind of use this as the framework here. I get accepted 70% of the time, according to Podmatch. That there's a statistics page that we all have access to, and I could see that 70% is my number. And people will ask, like, hey, how do I do that? The problem is they just go straight to like throwing that right hook over and over again. It's like the spray and pray method. And so for me, I always answer the same way. I'm like, I do two things. I lead with value and I focus on quality over quantity. And someone's like, well, how long does it take you to write a pitch? I'm like, about 45 minutes. Like, I don't have 45 minutes. I can send 100 pitches in 45 minutes. I'm like, great. Are you getting on any of those shows? Because if you didn't take even a second to see what it's about, you just looked at sorted by most popular shows on the internet and like sent them stuff, it might not work. But some people are like, how'd you get on this? Like, sometimes it's like really big shows, although I don't really target big shows. I really target aligned shows. That's my thing. I don't really care about the audience size, but I present it in a way that like, it's hard to say no if I'm at all the right fit. Now, if I'm the wrong fit, they can clearly tell me. I give them a room to do that. I'm not being like pushy, but I make sure the quality is really good. And yeah, it takes me 45 minutes, but I'm like, man, you reached out to 100 and got nothing back. I reached out to one in that same time and got a response and probably going to end up getting on the show. So again, like quality over quantity and leading with value are the two things that I say work better than anything when it comes to productivity online these days.
Well, I will be vulnerable here and say I do have a standard pitch on Podmatch. I worked with Claude AI to come up with it. It's got high name, and I always change name on there, but the pitch is always about value. And you said something about alignment. So I'm not pitching just anyone. If I think there's an alignment, I will send that, generic message to them. It tells, I've been over 1,300 episodes. So that's pretty good. People, when they see that, they usually stop and they're like, heck, I want this guy on my show because it's someone's done over 1,300 podcasts, not including the times I've been guesting on. That's just my own show. I think I'm at 1,325 now. But the pitch is very, very value. This is the value I can give your audience, which I want to share my feelings about being the host and being the guest. As a host, it's my job to make my guest look really, really good. As a guest, it's my job to make the host look really, really good. And I try to make it so they don't have to do hardly any work in editing. That's what I believe. What are your thoughts on that?
Same. I mean, we're here to serve each other so that we can serve listeners. And I've had guests on. I've not done nearly as many interviews as you have. My show has just over 300 episodes on it. But there's been a few interviews where I went against my better judgment and had the wrong guest on that was definitely very like self-centered, them focused. And it shows up. Like when I go back and listen to it, like I know my listeners can hear it too because they've heard enough from me. When someone's there to take and like they don't know the name of the show, they forget my name multiple times throughout. Like clearly they're not there to serve, right? And podcast listeners are really smart. Actually, like there's been a bunch of reports to show that podcast listeners are among the most educated, most well-off people in the world are the ones that are listening to podcasts, specifically in a vertical that you have here, right? Productivity. Like they're listening to better themselves. And so they're smart, typically smarter than the host and the guest sometimes, right? And so like if they hear a guest that they're like, this person is just here to sell something, they don't care about, like Alex doesn't care about Mark. Like I can just hear it in his voice and the way he's just waiting to pitch his stuff, right? They're smart enough to solve that. And I had one guy who didn't want to give up certain points from his book because he wanted people to buy the book. And like in the recording, I wasn't rude, but I want to be like, dude, if you give it all away, people are more likely to buy your book than you acting like you're not going to, to unlock the secret, buy my book, right? Like people don't, that's not why we're listening to podcasts, to have that happen. And so for me, man, it's really all about us showing up to serve each other so that we can in turn serve listeners at a really high level.
Before I launched my podcast in 2017, I made a decision I would always be ad-free. That's something, whether I have one download or 1 million downloads, I'm going to give people an ad-free experience. Now, there is 2 ads on this show. We've already mentioned podmatch.com and mrproductivity.com. Go there. Don't go there. We love you enough to serve you. But I was on someone's show recently, met them through Podmatch. They had a 2-minute introduction. Then they read 4 ads. Then they read the same ads in the middle and same ads at the end. I'm like, nobody's listening to that. I know you think people are listening to it. They're skipping it. So I'm not saying you shouldn't have ads on your show. My opinion, the decision I made in the beginning is I'd rather have people go to mrproductivity.com, hire me as a coach than to get a percentage, which most of these people, especially smaller podcasters, they're only doing affiliate links. So if you sign up for Audible, you get like $5. I know that, and it sounds to me kind of cheesy, but then again, this is the decision I made to go ad free. Now, you, as your podcast host, you can do whatever you want to do. Now, if you're listening on audio, when I said I went ad free, Alex did a thumbs up to me. So are you ad free as well?
I am. I have my own product, my own service as well, like Podmatch. And my podcast is called Podcasting Made Simple. It's about podcasting. It's for guests and hosts who want to learn to level up. Why would I talk about the mattress that you should be sleeping on, right? Like, yeah, maybe it makes you a better podcaster because you show up more awake. But here's how I always articulate this. If you have your own product or service and you're running an advertisement on your podcast, you should also go ahead and put an advertisement on your lead funnel page as well. Like where they're signing up to do a call with you. Also go ahead and just throw an ad on the side of that, right? Like that's basically the same thing. Like you are always going to do better talking about your own stuff than somebody else's stuff. And the other thing is, because this is mostly an audio medium, people listen to it, the more stuff you give them to do, the less likely they are to do anything. If I tell you, hey, Mark, I got 10 things I need you to do by the end of the day here, and I list them off, you're not going to do any of them. But if I say, hey, Mark, I got one thing that I think will help you with productivity, just one, here's what it is, and I articulate it really simply, you are more likely to write that down and do it. And for many of us, it's like, hey, buy this mattress. Also sign up for my service. Also, here's another ad that we're going to do, right? Like, I'm not trying to downplay ads, but I think that so many independent podcasters want to do it because they feel like it makes them look more like the big brands of the world. Tim Ferriss has a really great podcast. It is known for the first 5 minutes of his podcast. Every episode is ads. And people just, me too. If I'm going to listen, I skip straight to minute 5 because I know that's where the podcast actually starts. Other than that, it's 5 minutes of ads. I'm like, and people are like, oh, but I want to be like Tim Ferriss. I'm like, yes, I get that. But like, maybe talk about your own product or service instead until you get 10 million people listening every week or whatever it is, right? Like maybe work your way there and then decide that you want to do that. I'm big on not muddying the waters. Like have intention, have focus. Like the beauty is that we have people's ears, like they are listening to this. Give them the one thing that you think is most important for them to do.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of simplicity, and most people are listening to this podcast, even though it's available in video form. They may be out on a run, on a walk, walking the dog. They may be in a plane. They don't have Wi-Fi connection, but before they got on the plane, they were able to download the audio instead of the video. So I don't make podcasts that are specific to video. I mean, every once in a while, I'll hold up a book for my author, for my guest author, but it's about serving the people. And my other issue with ads is you have to vet everything that ad does. So let's say Alex is a great advertiser for my podcast, but then in my research, I find out this is not what Alex does, but he supports beating and killing baby seals. Well, if I don't vet that, and then someone listens to the show and goes to the website and go, oh, wait a minute. Oh my gosh, Alex likes the sports organization that kills baby seals. And so now Alex gets a hit. I get a hit. The listeners are all upset. And so to me, the vetting process, I'm not just going to, if I ever did have ads, which I promise I will never have ads, I would have to hire someone to vet this person, not just the company, but what do they believe in? Because there's so many tentacles there. And by you recommended someone, even though you're recommending because they paid you, you are responsible, in my opinion, ethically responsible for everything. When you send your listeners somebody else, you're responsible for that. And they find out that this person supports a cause you don't like to support. Well, that's going to come back on you because you recommended them.
Man, leave it to you to turn it into something productivity related, right? No ads because it takes too much time to vet, right? Like just keep it your own. But I mean, I think that really is great advice. And if you're listening to this and you're starting a podcast, have a podcast, thinking about anything like this, even like a website, whatever it might be, think about what you have to offer first and lead with that. And if not, if you're like, man, I don't have anything, but like, let's just imagine you're a fitness instructor and you use First Form, which is like nutritional vitamins and stuff like that. And that's like who you align with. Become a high level affiliate for them. Like you already know you align with that brand. So now you don't need to go create your own, but just that one, not the other 10 things, right? But make it your own. Bring it into what you do. Use your affiliate stuff versus making them an advertisement, asking them to pay you dollars, right? They might even do both. But if you're like, I never have a product or service, find that one thing that you really align with and go all in. Make a partnership with that. I've seen some people do incredibly well having no product or service of their own by finding the brand that's like, this is basically who I am. I've become an ambassador for this brand now. And that to me is a really suitable alternative for anyone who's getting into podcasting, blogging, or social media influencing, if we can call it that.
When people ask me, you've been doing podcasting for over 7.5 years. What advice do you have for me? And I'd like you to add on what I'm going to say. I said, first of all, don't do it for the money. You're not Joe Rogan. They're not going to give you $100 million Spotify contract, allegedly. Number two, have fun. Don't be so serious. I can tell you the episodes in the early days where I was very professorial, I was really professional, and I was like, I'm going to tell you about productivity. They didn't do as well when I started, letting my hair down. I don't have any hair if you're watching this, listen to audio. But when I started having fun, and I told my guest, I told you, just be yourself. I'm in a t-shirt, you're in a t-shirt, be comfortable. But if you're going in it for the money, you're going into it for the wrong reason. And the third thing is, if you're going to be a guest on someone's show, do not ask them how many downloads they have. Here's the why. That tells me you're not there to serve my audience. You're there to hawk your goods. And that gives me a bad taste in my mouth. So what do you can comment on that, or you can add your own.
Yeah. And you want me to focus on guesting side, hosting side, or both? Like, I want to make sure I answer correctly here.
Well, starting a podcast, let's start with what recommendation you give if someone wants to start their own podcast as a result of listening to our conversation today.
Yeah, just start is the very first thing. I go to a lot of the podcasting conferences and still speak at them and stuff like that. And there are two people now that I run into every year at a certain conference. One of them I met in 2018. The other one I met in 2021. Neither of them have launched their podcast yet because, quote unquote, I haven't really perfected the plan for it yet. And every time I tell them the same thing, I'm like, man, as soon as you start, no matter how much time you put into it, I promise you're going to change it. You are going to change it no matter what. Mm-hmm. And I always try to push them to start. And people use this idea of perfection or making it an expert level podcast to keep them from starting. I would have started podcasting a year earlier than I did if I didn't fall into that myself. It took me 9 months to start my podcast. In reality, it was maybe 2 weeks worth of work. But I was just planning, strategizing, thinking, and then I launched it, and 2 weeks later, the whole thing had changed. And I only knew that because I got into it. And so, yeah, have some time for planning, getting your ideas together and stuff. But at the end of the day, nothing beats just launching. And so at the same time, have some pride in what you do. I think we do live in a world now where having a microphone goes a really long way. Yeah. If you're listening to this, you can tell that me and Mark have good gear. It sounds good, right? And then putting a little bit of effort into editing as well. Now, I'm not saying you need to go through and move everything. As a matter of fact, I find that that's less humanizing. And the more human you make your podcast, the better it seems to do. But if Mark's microphone, that was hard for me to say, is 3 times louder than mine, then level that out. Because the last thing you want to have people do is they're in the car trying to listen on a trip or working out, and they're consistently pulling out their phone or messing with the dial in their car to turn it down when Alex talks and up when Mark talks, or vice versa. Yeah. Right? Make it a good listener experience. Have a little pride in what you do. To me, those are the key things and launching really well. And if I can add one more thing, and I think that some people kind of slip into this, which is good, but maybe have some sort of niche, vertical idea, focus of the show. The days of general shows is kind of behind us. They're not doing as well. You have to actually stand for something specific. Like right now, I'm going to let the listeners guess, Mark, I'm not going to tell them, but I would like them to guess what this show's focus is and what it's about. Right? They know what it is, right? It's in the title. It's in everything we've talked about. But some people are like, hey, this is the show. We're going to talk about pop culture, sports, movies. I guess that's pop culture, productivity, energy healing, and 10 other things. And you're like, what are we doing here? Right? Yeah. Not very many people like all those things. So just pick a little lane. I say little lane, you'd be shocked how many people you're going to connect with. The more niche you get, typically the bigger the show will actually get, because that's the person will find it who's really looking for it. I could share a million ideas, but I'm going to stop there. I think those are some good ones for today. I just realized I lied to the audience at the beginning. I said, we're not going to talk about podcasting. We just got into it. And so if you hate podcasting, well, what are you listening to podcasts for? I apologize for lying to you. I did not intend, but this is how my podcast goes. I don't script out the questions. We just go wherever we want to go. Folks, the barrier to entry for podcasting is so low. I host on Spotify for podcasters, not affiliated with the show. I don't get paid by them. It's free. So if you've got a computer, I don't recommend you using your built-in microphone. Go out and get a decent microphone. You don't have to get
$10,000 one. It's not $10,000, but hyperbole. But get yourself a decent microphone, but want to do it for the right reasons. And I want to end the show talking about AI, because AI is, I don't know if you heard about it. It's not a fad anymore. It's actually here now, and they're all going to kill us like Terminator. But one of the things I love about AI is I used to hate coming up with titles for my episode. So when we're done here, I take the transcript, I throw in the Claude AI, I say, give me an SEO friendly title, write the podcast description, write the meta description, write an email, write a readable blog post, because nobody reads transcripts. And in like a fraction of a second, it's done. And now when people look at the title, now they go, oh, I know exactly what the episode's about, because AI will scan the transcript and they'll say, oh, this is what they're talking about. And so, because the title, more than the cover, we all like our cover art, let's be honest. But the title is what gets people to read it. We all love our artwork if it's us. And if you're not familiar with the terminology, the artwork is the image you see, the artwork of the podcast, like the Mr. Productivity Podcast, Podcasting Made Simple. But it's the title, because people look at the title and go, nope, not interested. Oh, this one I'm interested in. So the title is so important.
So AI for me does very similar things that you just mentioned. It's the things that when I started my podcast, I knew I couldn't do, but wanted to, right? Like if we go back, 2017 is when you launched, right? Was that what it was?
Yep.
Yeah, 2017. I'm sure you looked at some of the big podcasters and was like, man, I wish I had a team of 20 people so I could write vlog posts, come up with this, right? Like all that stuff. And instead we put in just tons of work on the titles and the descriptions. And we're like, this is all I can do. This is my capacity. That's it. And AI has leveled the playing field where we're now able to do this. As a matter of fact, I was listening to an episode of your show earlier. I went for a walk to prepare for this. I was just thinking I wanted to listen to a show. So I was scrolling through, and it was actually, maybe it was even one of your most recent episodes. So I didn't scroll very far, but the title got me. It said from micromanager to visionary, a CEO's transformational journey. And you had Mickey Kennedy on. Loved the episode because I resonated with that. I'm like, man, I was a micromanaging guy, right? Like to this visionary, to become like this entrepreneur. Like it was by the way, everyone go back. It came out on 10/28/2024. Mickey Kennedy was on it. Go listen to that. It is worthwhile to listen to for sure. But the title was what hooked me. I knew that I resonated with that and wanted to listen to that because I used to be that micromanager, which is extremely like unproductive to be, right? And so that was a great use case of AI. I'm imagining AI helped you with that title. That's what you 100%. Leave on the table if you're not using AI in today's world. It's things like that where it can help you connect with the human that's most interested in what you want. And to me, the perfect use case of AI is not taking over your first line communication. Like I am not going to send Mark a thank you today for having me on the show and use AI to write it for me. I just find that to be a little bit like that pulls the human element out. I'm actually going to mean that. I'm probably going to write a single sentence. Mark, this was a blast. Thank you so much. Like I had so much fun. But the blog post, the title, that's just front-facing things to help people find you. I think that's like the true use case that's appropriate for AI in my book and kind of my convictions.
I rebranded the podcast in December 2022 from the Mark Struczewski podcast to the Mr. Productivity Podcast. Made sense, right? I mean, why am I calling the Mark Struczewski podcast unless you're from Poland? You can't even spell the name. But my favorite episode really wasn't directly related to productivity. It was back in the Mark Struczewski podcast days. It was a guy by the name of John Beatty. John Beatty summited Mount Everest. So if you want to listen to this episode, my 7th anniversary episode came out on July 17th, 2024. I have always been fascinated since I was a little kid of Mount Everest. And he came on the show and actually shared his journey. He almost didn't make it. Can you imagine being like 500 yards from the top from your destination and realizing you just can't go, I'll just go for it. You can't, you'll be dead. And most people don't understand what it takes. So I guess it was sort of productivity related to go up. You just don't like this weekend, let's go to the top of Mount Everest. It's a big deal. So if you're fascinated by almost didn't make it, but did make it. I mean, I even asked him, Alex, how do you go to the bathroom on Mount Everest? Because there's no rest areas. I mean, it's like you're up there for 10 months sometimes. I mean, because you got to go up a base camp, down, up and down, up and down to get acclimated. It's my favorite episode I ever did. And that's why I did it, I think, back in 2019. But I used it for the 7th anniversary because I completely re-edited the podcast, by the way, because my editing skills are a little better now. and fascinating. So if you get a chance, it's not video, unfortunately, but if you want to go listen to a fascinating episode, listen to that John Beatty. It's the 7th anniversary episode, not July 17th. Where did I say that from? July 7th, 2017. My 7th anniversary episode, July 7th, 2024. So there you go. So as we
I've
wrap
already
up,
written down. I'm all in for that one. That sounds amazing. So thank you.
Well, let me know. Let me know. You won't be able to text me. I guess you'll send me a carrier pigeon. So let me know when you listen to the episode. I'd be fascinated. So before we wrap up, any parting advice about, it could be about how you don't use email, you don't use a phone, or it could be about podcasting. What do you want to share with us that we wrap up?
Yeah, the thing that moved the needle for me the most, like everything I shared here, even podcasting related, is to do this simple practice that I just call taking inventory. I can remember back in my aerospace days, like I did a 15-year career in big corporate, and I was responsible for the actual physical inventory we had in one of our locations. And we did every quarter, we did what we call taking inventory, where it'd be a weekend thing. We'd count everything in the entire inventory to see what's going on, right? Just make sure that we're good. We balance everything out. And I apply that to my personal life. So what I do is every 90 days, I write down 30 things, just kind of following myself throughout my day, thinking about it, 30 things I'm doing that I think maybe I could do better, or that I think might be wasting my time, or just not the best use of my time. And some of them are really silly. Like checking my email at one point was on there. I was inbox zero. I was checking it 30 times a day. And I wrote down, like, this is probably wasting 45 minutes of my day. And so I encourage you, like, do that and then think about, what can I do to replace this time or to make it something better? I always talk about automating, delegating, or eliminating those things on the inventory list. And like, don't keep the things that you love, right? Time with my wife is never on this inventory list. It's something I need to can I do less of this, right? That's never there. But it's always something that's really simple, right? Like, how do I get more control of my digital devices, as me and Mark were talking about at the beginning, right? Think about that. So I encourage people, think about this. Even if you don't do it quarterly, do it once and see if it serves you. Mm-hmm. Take inventory and think of the things that are really taking the most of your time that aren't desirable, and think, can I automate, delegate, or eliminate this in any situation or way to better my life? And for me, that's really helped move the needle a lot. And I know I sound extreme in some cases, but this is the stuff that's given me a life that I really, really enjoy. And I think I live a very happily productive life right now.
I love it. And I actually teach a framework called the ODAE framework. ODAE stands for outsource, delegate, automate. And my favorite letter, eliminate, because a lot of us are doing stuff that we don't know why we're doing them. We're doing them anyways. It's wasting so much time. So I love that. That's a great way to wrap up the show. So I got a feeling, I know where you're going to tell us where we can go find out more about you and what you're doing. But let's see if my prediction's right. Where can we go to find out more about you?
Podmatch.com/free is the specific page I love to send people to. It just gives you 5 quick ideas. If you're a podcast guest host or aspiring guest or host, thinking you're interested in it, it'll give you 5 quick ideas for how to do that, how to do it better. Doesn't want your email address or anything like that. Just a way that can purely serve and add value. And it kind of welcomes you into my world. And that's podmatch.com/free. Mark, is that what you're thinking?
Yes. I don't know why I came up with the idea. Great minds think alike. I don't know, but I really want to thank you for being on the show today. When I first signed up for Podmatch, I saw a bunch of videos. Alex does this really great thing where here's how to get the most out of Podmatch. And when he appeared on my screen, it's like, is this really him? Or is this like a video from Podmatch? But because same microphone, same background, different shirt, I think. But I love what you guys are doing. I'm a really big fan. I actually had to downgrade my plan. These was 2 plans, there's 57 and 32. I just couldn't keep up with it because I'm focusing on so many things in my business right now. But I really support your mission. I love what you guys are doing. And now you recently added the AI. It's constant improvements. And I'm really thankful you came on the show today. So after you go to podmatch.com/free, head on over to my website, MrProductivity.com. Remember, it's Mr. all spelled out, M-I-S-T-E-R. I spent $1 billion through LegalZoom to get that trademark. So not M-R period, M-I-S-T-E-R, MrProductivity.com. We'll be back real soon with a brand new episode. Until then, be productive, but most importantly, stay positive. Hey, welcome back to the Mr. Productivity Podcast. On the show today, Sanfilippo. He's the founder. Oh, I'm doing that over again. Blah, blah.
You got to keep this in, though. It's a fun blooper. It's got to make the blooper reel, right?
Oh, yeah. I got to do it because you're a podcaster. Okay, so we'll do it again. Hey, welcome back to the Mr. Productivity Podcast. On the show today, Alex Sanfilippo. Oh my goodness.
Sanfilippo. You're like right there on it.
Yeah, but I could say it before we started recording. Oh my goodness. Okay, take 432. Hey, welcome back to the Mr. Productivity Podcast. On the show today, Alex Sanfilippo.
That helps. If it's Italian, so if you do this, it helps you say it.
Oh, Sanfilippo.
Or you can just say Alex, and I can say the rest.
I'm just going to say Alex. Okay,
I love it.
I'm like, whoa! I never saw it on my show. Okay, take 632.